Hello everyone, how's it going? I'm WoWcrendor and welcome back to another episode of Fishing with Crendor, where I fish with random people from the internet. And today I'm joined by Adam Koebel.
That's me. Hello.
That's you. How you doing?
I'm great.
That's good. So first off, let's have you tell everybody kind of who you are, what you do, etc.
Yeah. So, my name's Adam Koebel, and I am probably best known for my Twitch and YouTube content related to tabletop role-playing games, to Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing, mostly by way of a show called Roleplay. So I've been the dungeon master for a couple of different campaigns for Roleplay. I do some work for a virtual tabletop called Roll20, and I also design my own tabletop role-playing game called Dungeon World. So I'm a big old school rolling dice nerd. Though the last time I actually rolled like physical dice for any amount of time was quite some time ago. Now it's mostly I click a button that says roll dice and then pretend 3D dice go blah on the table, and we all pretend like I'm rolling. But it's close enough. Same.
Yeah, I mean I'm like that with like all the Blood Bowl games. I mean,
right.
I don't know if I'd actually
or Hearthstone or
Yeah. It's one of those things where you don't realize how much time it probably takes in real life too, because I mean, having it calculate everything to all that still takes like an hour to 2 hours. So I'm like, in real life, this must take like half the day.
Yeah, it's the difference between playing Baldur's Gate and playing Dungeons and Dragons, where you're like, cool, I fought a dragon, and it took 10 minutes in the video game, but at the table you'd be like, all right, 6 hours later, you killed the dragon, guys, good work, we did it. Put away your graphing calculators. It's complete.
I'm not gonna lie, I hadn't even role-played, like an actual Dungeons and Dragons role-play thing up until I was on Roleplay. But I was on with, it was me, Shannon, Maggie, and Jesse, and we were on with Steven.
Yeah, on West Marches?
It was, wait, was it? No, it was the Viking one.
That? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you guys did Sagas of the Icelanders.
Yeah, that's what it was. That was the first time I ever did a role-playing type of show.
It's a hell of a first. It's a hell of a first show to do too, because Sagas of the Icelanders is like a fairly, at its core, a fairly serious analysis of like Icelandic gender roles in the year 900. So. Yeah, good deep end start on that one. I'm sure that it went great, and at the end of it, you were like, "Yes, I understand what it's like to live in Iceland in the year 900."
I definitely did. I think I was an old witch, and it ended with like a Star Wars-esque battle where I was trying to make Shannon my Darth Vader, and Jesse was trying to take me down, and.
I feel like that's the danger of role playing with Jesse Cox, though, is that everything turns into Star Wars eventually.
That's true.
You play long enough, so yeah.
You're not wrong. And then I went on to do my my DMing of Daikia, which you helped me out. Well, you tried to help me. And I
feel like Daikia was very successful. I feel like it accomplished exactly what we all wanted from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny. Daikia, if folks haven't watched it, it's so good because it represents pretty much the same experience most people have when they play Dungeons and Dragons or any other tabletop game for the first time. Like as a kid, like watching it, I was like, yeah, this is how I GM'd the first time I ever played. Only I was 10 at the time, but like it's the same principles where you're just like, I know there's a rule for this, but I'm not going to bother looking it up. I'm just going to make something up, and that's how it goes because I'm in charge, and that's the deal. And it's actually really refreshing to get to watch that, where the audience doesn't expect, like for me, because I've got all this experience, I've been doing this a long time. There's a great deal of like expectation. I'm going to get the rules right, and I'm going to play by a certain set of parameters. Whereas with Daikia, it was like, well, it's Crendor. Crendor hasn't GM'd before, and y'all know Crendor. So it's going to be the best kind of shit show, and it worked out great. I was so happy. I haven't laughed so hard in a very long time. It was good stuff.
Well, thank you. I accomplished what I wanted then.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? And this is what's so cool about like that. We've done some one shots with other folks, right? Like Jesse did his Christmas one shot. and where everybody played themselves, and Dodger's done a couple of GMing stints, and it's really cool watching what everybody brings to the table as a GM, like what their own sort of personal sensibilities are, because like when Dodger, as you can imagine, when Dodger runs it, she's a lot more like, okay, we just want to like make sure everybody has a good time, and like she's like a nice person and a decent human being. Right. And then when the rest of us GM, it's like, no, you're dead. I killed you. I rolled all the dice. Now you're dead, sucker. Even though I get to make up the rules. Yeah. So it's really cool getting to watch new people get into GMing and run it for the first time, because people will do things that I would never have thought to do, even though I've been playing for 25 years. I'm like, oh, that's clever. Look at that, because everybody's kind of got their own spin they can put on it. Even though technically there are rules for these games, but yeah, it's been super cool. I love that.
I think my favorite part of a lot of these types of things is the dice element, and I kind of learned that in Blood Bowl a bit, because Blood Bowl is just a strategic type of game with chess elements, like I gotta move this guy here, protect the ball, do that. But then you throw in the random fact of like, all right, roll the die. Oh, you rolled a 1, you slipped, you're dead. It's like, all right.
Well, it keeps you on your toes, right? Because you, in chess, the thing you're reacting to is just what your opponent is doing. There is no randomness in a game like that. So you're watching your opponent, you're figuring out what strategies they might be doing, but there's no like, cool, my queen attacks your pawn, and I critically failed and my queen died. Like it's you kind of know what's going to happen. And the more random a game is, the more those things come up, the more it keeps the whole table kind of on their feet, where they're like, okay, cool, so my character has wings now. Okay, now I turned into a gelatinous slime with wings. Great. Okay, cool. That's the new thing. And you're constantly having to adapt to like what's going on with your character, which is why I think games like the Mutant Future that you played, and games like Made are so like fun to do as shows, because you can come in with a character, but you have no idea what's going to happen to you moment to moment, and neither does the GM. You're just rolling, and everybody has to just kind of shrug and be like, well, okay, this is where we're at now. This is what's happening. Just roll with it.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
So let's talk about, we can get back to role-playing in a bit, but let's talk about just World of Warcraft for a bit, because I want to explain why I'm fishing in Molten Core, of all places. Well, I'm fishing right outside Molten Core. So let's talk about, when did you play World of Warcraft for the first time, or when did you play like PC games or video games in general for the first time?
I mean, I've been playing video games since I would have been like 4, I guess. My mom bought a Nintendo when she got pregnant with my little brother, and because she was home from work and didn't have much to do, and so she would like sit around and play Mario, and I would hang out with her. And eventually I like got the motor skills to play by myself. So I've had video games around pretty much my whole life. We got a PC, I think I was 10 or 11. I remember playing Myst and like Blackthorn. I think Blackthorn is my first Blizzard game. It's the first Blizzard game I ever played.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. So it's always been like Nintendo consoles and PCs for me. I remember when I was in junior high, for you American viewers, it was like middle school here. But it was me and a couple of my friends, and we would make Doom levels, and we would pass around like floppy disks with our Doom level in progress and like work on them together, and then we would have like LAN parties and play Doom. And so I've been playing games since forever, and I think like I played WoW. The earliest like WoW memory I have is in the beta. It was either whichever was first, when they put hunters in the game, or when Tauren were first a thing. One of those two. I can't place which one, but
I think
that was sort of
first.
Yeah, that was like right around when I started, and I played pretty regularly all the way up to Burning Crusade, though there was a gap where I was taking a hiatus from WoW. But I played EverQuest and Asheron's Call and a bunch of all the kind of old like pre-WoW, very janky early MMOs.
Did you play Star Wars Galaxies at all?
Oh yes, yeah. I like so many people were like, I could be a blaster merchant, and then I played it, and I was like, no, no, I cannot. This is terrible. I don't. And every time Star Wars Galaxies comes up, I have to wonder if I'm talking about the same game as other people because everyone seems to love it so much, and I just remember hating it when I played it. Like I just remember feeling like, wow, this is like I love Star Wars. I love Star Wars a lot, but like I don't love Star Wars this much.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just there was a while where I played so many of these kind of like you could download the client for free and you got your first month free, like real janky old MMOs. Like there was this first person kind of like European cyberpunk game called Neocron that I remember playing, and it was really bad, but that's how we played these games. We're just like, I don't know, it's terrible, but I've never played it before, so let's try it out. And I remember being able to buy like a pair of cool Matrix sunglasses and like some pistols, and then somebody broke the economy of the game and just ran around giving everyone 1,000,000 credits, and then they shut the game down because they didn't know how to fix it, and that was the end of. Was the end of Neocron. Yeah, I played Dark Age of Camelot, a little Anarchy Online. These were strange times.
You ever play
back in the day?
MU Online?
It sounds. I probably did. I mean, I played like I probably played it for 5 minutes and then was like, cool, what's this thing? This is game's from Korea. Let's try this one. It's got like a playable muffin.
It's literally just Korean Diablo, but online.
There you go. Yeah.
It's one of those games where I always ask everybody, and out of like all like over 35 people I fished with, only one person was like, dude, yeah, I love that game. It's like, right? Yes, finally.
Yeah, because I think like a lot of people have that same like I kind of remember that. That sounds familiar. Yeah. But yeah, for me it was that sort of like end of the 90s to early 2000s, like the first EverQuest. I remember playing getting bored of EverQuest content and then watching people try to kill the like resurrection priests, or like they'd go to the high elf village and get really drunk and try to run across the bridge that didn't have railings and see if you could get there without falling. These weird things that we do, and people do it in games now, but we call it emergent gameplay. But this shit that we used to do, where we're like, this game is boring. I'm done with this boring stuff. Let's try to make up a new game inside the game.
Yeah, it's like making your own fun, essentially.
Yeah, and most of the time it was just totally ridiculous. But every once in a while, like that, and that's totally the kind of thing that game devs will like sell as a thing, where they're like, yeah, it's like a tool set for making your own fun. And I'm like, no, I paid $80 for this. You make it fun. Make it fun for me, please.
Did you play a lot of EverQuest then, like the original one, or just a bit?
I did, yeah. I played a fair bit of early EverQuest.
I'm kind of curious then is how you compare that to WoW, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, WoW took EverQuest and made it more casual and streamlined for everybody, and that's what made WoW so popular. Like, do you think that's true, or like, what are the differences?
Yeah, I mean, so EverQuest, there's some tabletop analogy here in that the more game designers are realizing that the more you want people to play a game, the less like brutally punishing the game should be. Like to the point where there were several times where I quit EverQuest in a rage. And I've had frustrating times with WoW, but never to the degree of EverQuest, where like I would get killed and some ogre jerk off would steal everything in my inventory, and then I would have to spend 4 hours talking to this guy from like douchebag Missouri and be like, dude, just give me my sword back. And he's like, no, you'll have to give me 10,000 gold. I'm like, no one has that much gold, dude. Just give me my sword. No, I don't think so. And when you died, you lost a ton of XP. So you could be like going in at level 20, and if you have a bad night, not only do you not level up, but you're like, great, cool, now I'm level 19. I got to redo all that shit I did before. So, I think that as games themselves have expanded to a bigger audience, MMOs obviously followed suit. And I definitely think that that's part of WoW's success. And I know a lot of people are like, WoW, made it easy. And I remember back. But when I think about EverQuest, I'm not like, yeah, I remember when it was like getting punched in the face for 6 hours a time. I'm like, thank God we're free. We're free of that horrible crap. It's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of that was to try and keep people playing the games. Like if they lose something, they got to get it back, and it'll keep them playing the game. But it's more of just an annoyance or a hindrance at that point.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like, I mean, to be fair, there's a gradient here, right? Where I think EverQuest is to like Ultima Online what WoW is to EverQuest, in the sense that EverQuest really was the first game that you could show it to someone who had only ever played WoW, didn't understand anything else about MMOs, and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, it's an MMO." Like you get a party together and you go on quests and you go on dungeons and you kill monsters in a group, like that kind of thing. It's the beginning of that model. Whereas I think if you were to take your average WoW player and drop them into Ultima Online, they'd be like, "What is happening? What is this? I don't understand this."
Yeah.
Like weird isometric top-down thing. I don't. Yeah.
I guess it's just the way games evolve as well through time.
Yeah, I mean D&D is the same way, right? Like early versions of D&D, there was a lot of like sort of you make one roll or your character dies stuff. It was a much more brutal game in that sense, where you'd spend 4 or 5 hours making your character. You get all ready. You're like, all right, Sir Baldric of Greaves is ready to go on his first adventure, and you get out there and you're in the dungeon, and the GM's like, cool, you see a treasure chest. What do you do? And you're like, all right, Sir Baldric opens a treasure chest, and the GM's like, cool, a cobra bites you in the eye, you die, you're dead. Roll a new character. You're like, God damn it. There's a softening, there's a gentling of games into this space where now, because that kind of experience, I think, really turns people off from playing games. So the idea of spending 6 to 8 hours in EverQuest one night and having nothing to show for it, it's nice that we've kind of moved away from that. And there's enough room for that sort of brutality in games, but now it's a way to market it to a particular audience instead of just being like, this is how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now that's become more of like, this is a hardcore setting almost. But like some people obviously like that, but why do you think that was kind of the staple back then? Like obviously it even carried into Dungeons and Dragons and all that.
Well, and that's the thing is I think that mostly it flows, like there's so much in modern gaming that flows from tabletop, right? The concept of hit points is from D&D. Like that wasn't a thing prior to Dungeons and Dragons. There were war games, but mostly like in a war game, if one of your little Saxon archers got hit with a spear, they were dead. We didn't count their health. And then Castlevania for the Nintendo came out, and that used hit points. Was one of the first examples of that, and that comes from D&D. Obviously, the whole Final Fantasy series, and then tons from MMOs, because early MMOs came from like MUDs, from multi-user dungeons, which were just ways for people on BBSs and Telnet to play role-playing games together. So we can track all of this stuff back to D&D, and the thing about D&D is that it's a war game, and war is hell, right? So it's like, we our origin point for these games are pretty black and white and pretty brutal. So I think that that's something that's been in the lineage of games all the way back to their sort of earliest foundations in the early 70s.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's something I never even really thought about up until now that much.
Yeah, it's super cool if you sort of track. There's a book by John Peterson called Playing at the World that basically talks only about the very, very early parts of tabletop role playing, like only the very first edition of D&D, some of the weird kind of 1800s war game, like German war games that it came from. And it tracks that stuff, and it shows a bunch of examples of like, this is the first time we had this mechanic in a game, and this is the first time like dungeons are a thing, and it tracks all the different places in the 70s where this stuff developed, and it's super cool and actually kind of weird to be able to look at stuff that's in use now and be like, oh, like this is from Dungeons and Dragons. This flows all the way back to it, which I think is why the experience of playing D&D, even if people have never played it before, if you take someone who's played StarCraft or World of Warcraft or a first-person shooter or a Nintendo game or whatever, you take anybody who's got gaming experience and you kind of flop them down in front of a table with other people playing D&D, they're going to understand the context because whether they know it or not, they live in an ecosystem that, in a lot of ways, is built on D&D and comes from there.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So, what about when you started playing WoW then? Like, you already had the experience and the mindset of, like, playing those types of games. Now you go into WoW, which is a lot more streamlined. Did you enjoy it, or were you like...
Yeah, the thing that drew me to WoW was I loved Warcraft 3. Like, the whole... I played Warcraft 1 and 2. 3 was, for me, like, the age that I was when it came out, and having played 2 as much as I did, you know, I was poised to be just like really excited about it. I remember buying a new video card at the mall back when we still had like Sam the Interactive Man was a thing. I went down to the old Sam the Interactive Man, which was the like Sam the Record Man. People who were born like after 1985 are like, Adam, what are you talking about? What even stores are these? So kids, there used to be these things called record stores, and they used to sell records, and nobody wanted those anymore. So then they sold cassette tapes, then they sold CDs, and then they disappeared forever. Except some of them still sell records. But there was this one called Sam the Record Man, and when consoles came out and stuff and became popular in North America, they branched off, and we started seeing game stores. And usually there would be like a games section in a place like this. And so for me, in the mall in small town British Columbia, Canada, that's where I would go. And I remember going there and buying this video card. It was like a Voodoo 2 or something. With all the money that I'd saved up, and I had to decide. I was standing there in the store, and I had Warcraft 3 and I had Neverwinter Nights. And I was like, which one am I going to buy? I don't know. What am I going to do? And I made the correct choice. Neverwinter Nights was cool, but I made the correct choice. I bought Warcraft 3, and it was amazing. It was so good. The story was great. It was all like exactly what I wanted. And when World of Warcraft came out, I was like, oh my god, it's like two things that I love. It's all the lore dorkiness of Warcraft, and then I could just play it forever. Because I've played the campaign and I played the multiplayer for Warcraft 3 so many times that I'm just like done with it. But like, now I can role play with my friends, and I can like, because there definitely was, I would say probably more. It was less erotic certainly back then, but the RP communities that I was a part of, there was a lot of like, cool, we're just gonna hang out in this inn and pretend to be orcs. Yeah. Which, as someone who's really into D&D, that was part of the appeal for me. Was like, get to make a persona and like do the thing. It didn't really ever pan out that way. It just ended up like, cool, we're gonna try to come up with an RP reason that we're killing this boss again that we've killed 400,000 times. But yeah, it was just the opportunity to explore that world that I was already kind of in love with in a new way, to like run around in this space instead of having the game, like in Warcraft 3, like lead me from place to place. And so it kind of felt like, early on, it felt like tourism, right? It felt like being in an amusement park based on a thing that I already love, like walking around and being like, wait a second, like I know this place. I've read about this, or I've been here. So that, for me, the whole initial part where they were building the game and doing all the beta and stuff leading up to launch was just like eyes wide and sparkling wonderment. Prior to most of the like actual game stuff kicking in, it was just a lot of running around and seeing the stuff they were building as they were getting it ready.
Yeah, so it was more about just seeing Warcraft 3 come to life, or just the Warcraft series in general.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was getting to visit a place, because I had, you know, like many fans, for me as a kid, my equivalent of like writing fan fiction, like I can't draw and I'm too lazy to write. So what I would do is we'd play Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd be like, okay, it's D&D, but it's set in Lordaeron, and like we're gonna fight the like two-headed ogres, and we're gonna deal, like it's gonna be our own story in the Warcraft universe. So it was super cool to see that come to life in a space where it wasn't just me making this stuff up for my friends, who none of them liked Warcraft as much as me. Now I was like, someone else is making this place for me, and I get to check it out myself and go exploring.
So you were talking about how Molten Core was one of your fondest memories.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And that's why I'm fishing right here. So you talk about that a bit.
Yeah. So after that initial kind of glossy, like, hooray, Warcraft phase was over, that's when shit got serious, and we were like, no, we're gonna play this game. We're gonna get to the max level. I'm gonna get that stupid anathema staff, and we're gonna kick the crap out of these raids. Yeah, and then it was just like Molten Core, just over and over and over and over, forever, until just stopped. I just couldn't do it anymore. I remember finishing an instance of Molten Core, and one of those terrible ones that just like it goes on forever, and you can just feel everybody getting angrier and angrier,
Yeah.
and it's not anybody's fault, but you all just become just total like terrible players all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And you're all blaming each other, and you're just like, you know what? I hate all of you. I hate this game. I hate my computer. I'm just gonna go lie down and watch Star Trek: The Next Generation until I don't care about this anymore. But like, yeah, I just got to a point where I was like, all right, I can't play, and we put it aside. I'd pick it up again when Burning Crusade came out, but yeah, I just remember a lot of too soon Executus. Though I did get to play, and you know, World of Warcraft historians will be able to date this event, but the thing I always remember about Molten Core that I, for some reason, thought was so funny was there was a bug where there was a specific kind of hunter arrow that if you shot Ragnaros with it, it got all huge, and it was like you were shooting him with ballistas, and by the end of the fight, he was just covered in spiky protrusions, and every time we did that fight, I was just like, the arrows are so big, because I guess they would scale up when they hit him, so he just looked like he was a pincushion, and that is the only positive thing I can remember about doing Molten Core. Everything else, I was like, oh god, fire resist gear, what are we doing?
Trash mobs.
Yes, trash mobs everywhere.
Molten Core, I always remember, is more of a like social thing. Like there were just so many people, and we had our like priest chat thing, and everybody else had their other class chats, and it was just like hanging out and talking to people. Like I remember that more than actually doing the fights and everything we did there.
Yeah, I remember feeling like, because it was a 40-player dungeon, and I definitely remember feeling like everyone else in the raid took it way more seriously than I did, and as a result were much higher caliber players. And so there were definitely raids where I would just go and be like, I guess okay, you're full health, I don't need to heal you. Everybody, you're good? Everybody's good? I'll just be back here listening to this Wu-Tang record. You let me know when we're done. I'm gonna alt tab over here. But you know, this is the thing, is that when Molten Core was out, it was the perfect time for me to be spending way too much time playing video games, because you know I was young enough that I was in between high school and university, and I did not live with my parents anymore, and so my roommate and I were both just totally addicted to playing Warcraft, and so neither of us would be that person who's like, I think maybe that you have been playing too much
Yeah.
and you need to take a break. This would be the like, it would be light out, and we would start playing, and one of us would be like, hey, I think it's daytime, and then I was like, I don't, okay, and like open the blinds, be like, yep, you want to do another one, or just we're gonna, okay. So thankfully, you know, I feel like as Warcraft itself grew up, as I reached a point where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just take a step back, and then I kind of like I re-engaged a little bit during Burning Crusade. I thought it was super kooky and weird, which I think whenever Blizzard tries to do something like that, like a little like lighthearted or weird, especially with like Diablo, people lose it. They're just like, this is, especially with early Warcraft, because early Warcraft was way more serious. I feel like Blizzard's games are a little goofy now, and that's kind of accepted as part of their brand. But back then, World of Warcraft was like pretty joke-free for the most part. There were a few little bits and pieces, but I would say it was tonally much more like Warcraft 3. And so when Burning Crusade came out, I remember a lot of my friends were like, this is dumb, this is the worst. Everybody looks like a clown, which fair, they did.
Yeah.
But I kind of got back some of that early, like, wow, this is really neat. I get to explore this new place. Look at these giant mushrooms, and look at this, like, these weird mounts and stuff that you could get. And I remember that being, I didn't do any raiding really. I think I just did all the kind of basic leveling and stuff, and bailed out before endgame. But I remember feeling again of being like, yeah, this is super cool. And then I missed what is apparently the best part of World of Warcraft. I missed Lich King completely. Just totally I didn't have any access to that. And anytime I talk to my friends that played World of Warcraft, they're like, that that was when it got good again. It got all serious and like everybody looked cool and tough. And I was like, well, I mean, I like Arthas. He's a cool guy, but I don't. I guess I just missed that bit.
Yeah, Lich King is probably my favorite, to be honest.
I feel like it's most people's favorite, right? Like, I feel like it's just like that's a part. I've been through the zone and stuff. I've leveled up through there, but I never did any of the raids, or I went back and like would wander around in them or do the solo content that you're like way overpowered for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't have the same like by that time, by 2008, I'd moved on to other stuff. I went through a brief period where I just wasn't playing a lot of games. Where I guess I was pretending that I wasn't a huge nerd, but then I was like, no, this is not who I am, and I went back to playing games. And I picked the game up again and played. I played through Kata and Pandaria a fair bit. Cataclysm was a combination of sort of PTSD from all those Molten Core raids, because I was like, wait a second, oh, it's Fire Guy again. And then Pandaria I thought Pandaria was pretty good. And then I
it was like a joke at the time, and then looking back on it, I was like, I actually enjoyed Pandaria.
I liked it because for whatever Blizzard sort of hits and misses with trying to do kind of content rooted in real world cultures, right? Like Pandaria was sort of their homage to mythical China, only instead of Chinese people, they're pandas. Which say whatever you want about that.
Yeah.
But it is really cool seeing a fantasy game, especially a big fantasy game like Warcraft, do some mythological stuff that isn't just like Tolkien. It's like here's some. Right. It's fake Europe, and the fake Europeans are fighting these fake green Europeans that are like Vikings, but they're green and they have tusks, and we call them orcs. So it was neat. It was neat them being like, cool, well, actually, like, there's this deep cultural pool to draw from, this well of interesting mythology, and to get to see some of that stuff, I think was really, really neat. And so, yeah, so I played in Kata, and I did the raid thing in that, and then I played Pandaria pretty casually, and then sort of it tapered out from there. But I remember I mostly got back into Cataclysm and into playing WoW because my girlfriend at the time was in a World of Warcraft guild, and she was raiding twice a week and taking it fairly seriously. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll come and play. And I made my Draenei shaman and joined the raid. And I remember having a conversation after the first raid we did. And we were done, and we were like having dinner or something, and I was like, "So it was fun." And she's like, kind of being like quiet, and I was like, "Is something wrong?" Or like, and she's like, "Well, like your DPS was really bad," and I was just like, "Oh my god, I'm embarrassing my girlfriend with my bad DPS." And I felt, on the one hand, I felt so like, "Oh god, okay, I'm sorry that I embarrassed you in front of your guild friends. I will do better. All right, I will switch specs. I'll go enhance. We'll make it happen. I promise. I will I'll get that DPS meter. I'll impress you." But on the other hand, it was just so funny because that experience is often like gendered in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
there's that expectation of like
bringing in the girlfriend,
right?
Like, hey.
Yeah, and I was just like the clueless boyfriend. I was like, "Hey guys, what's up? Let's have a good time." And they're just like, "Shut up, Adam. Just fight it. Punch it with your fists." I was like, "Oh god, I'm sorry. This is really serious." Yeah, but eventually,
don't worry,
like
I'm always bottom of the DPS meters.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was just like, I don't know if it's me or I just don't understand something, or like I'm like, I got my rotation down, I've been practicing, and I can't do what I'm trying, guys. But it was fun. It's not the kind of gameplay that, like, for me, I liked the let's all get together and overcome an obstacle together. But once it got kind of competitive, where I was like, okay, I have to be like the best enhanced shaman. I can't just be like, I'm here to have a good time and do some damage. I'm like, no, if I'm the bottom of the list, everyone's going to hate me. And I was like, okay, there's a reason I avoided sports in high school. This feels like sport, and I'm going to go ahead and let you play with your friends. It didn't help that she had been with the guild for a really long time and was really, really good at it, and had been playing the same character. She'd been playing a rogue forever, and she was just like super practiced. And I was just like, cool. I'm gonna cheer. I'll be your cheerleader. I'll be in the other room, and you text me when you beat the boss, and I'll be like, "Good job, honey. You're great. I'm over here reading a book, and it's fine."
Did you ever notice how WoW has changed and like feel that it changed too much, or do you think it's like in a good place, or what have you thought about where it's gone?
I really like when game companies take risks, especially companies that have like just like a buttload of money and can do those things. And I really like watching the way my favorite thing, we talked a little bit about it, my favorite thing about watching World of Warcraft change over time is how Blizzard has changed, right? How the way the company sees itself, the way that it hires and trains its writers, and the way the writers bring influence to the game, the sort of tonal shift across the board for all of the games. And that's been really cool, because World of Warcraft started a lot blander than I think it is now. You can very very much feel Blizzard's tonal influence on the game, and I think if you watch other games come out, they influence World of Warcraft, and Warcraft influences things. Like Diablo changed because of the successful stuff they were doing in WoW. I think Overwatch is changing the way the other games are being developed, because it's all in line with a sort of a brand identity, which I think is super cool. Because I come from an advertising background, so watching the little subtle stuff that they do to sell their games, not just as Warcraft or Diablo or Overwatch, but like they're all Blizzard games and sort of the Blizzard brand story. That's really fun to try to decipher for me. I'm not, the thing is, I'm not super up on the last couple of expansions. So the gameplay is the part I've always sort of been the least attached to. It's been the world. I'll always read like the lore. Like I love reading like wiki posts. I'll go and check in on a character, be like, oh, what's Malfurion up to these days? Yeah. You know, but the actual game and the experiencing of the world is something that's I've been a bit separated from. But it's been interesting just picking up for me people's return to, or folks who never played the early vanilla stuff, the idea of like, oh, let's go back to those halcyon days. And I'm like, no, like there's lots of stuff you don't return to that. Like, yes, cool, like bring back the old stuff thematically, but whoa. Like people talking about, like, I guess they're doing something with like vanilla servers and you can go back and like play, and I'm like,
yeah, the
Jesus,
vanilla servers.
Stay away from me with that shit. I don't want that at all. That it was tedious. It's like going back and playing GoldenEye. You know?
Oh yeah.
People are like, yeah, GoldenEye, one of the greatest shooters ever made. And I'm like, when was the last time you held a Nintendo 64 controller in your hand? Like, when was that? Because GoldenEye is not as good as you remember, like many things that were formative for us.
I think there's two types of people. There's either people that are like, oh yeah, vanilla, I do not want that at all. I remember it, like it's tedious and everything. And then there's people who are like, yeah, vanilla WoW, like I can't wait to go back, and like the game was hard and all that type of stuff. I want to play it strictly because of the nostalgia purposes, like all the things people have said, like, oh yeah, I remember this, remember that. I want to go back and actually relive that to be like, all right, so this is the nostalgia I'm remembering. Maybe it was as good, maybe it wasn't as good. Like I want to verify all of my nostalgic claims.
Right. I feel like vanilla WoW, and what's weird is that this analogy, like I feel like it's a trip home, right? It's like you grew up in your hometown and you went to school there and you got all these memories of these different places. And like for me, World of Warcraft was a very social activity. So I can remember interactions that I had with people in places. I remember being in Scarlet Monastery and pissing off a friend of mine, IRL, and him refusing to heal me and me dying and all of us dying. And the group being like, why did that happen? And just, it was super weird and awkward and human. It was like these other things were affecting it. And so I have all these memories about these places in World of Warcraft like it was a real place, like smoking cigarettes in the 7-Eleven parking lot. But instead of that, it's like that time that we all got killed in Scarlet Monastery. Yeah. And so I think it's cool, the idea of being able to return to that place, because a game like World of Warcraft, you can conserve the things in a digital space that you never could in real life. Like my high school was torn down. My old house was torn down. My old neighborhood is a fully developed suburban like subdivision now, where when I lived there were trees everywhere, but in real life you can never go home. But in World of Warcraft, I think there is that very powerful urge to return home. And World of Warcraft's been out a long enough time now that the amount of time between now and the memories that people made is pretty comparable to like graduating high school and then becoming an adult and then going back for your reunion, right? So I understand that appeal for sure, but I also have that fear that it's going to be like GoldenEye, and I'm going to be like, yeah, let's go check it out, and you go and you're just like, ugh, this is bad. This is not fun. But I think if you go in knowing like I'm not here to have any new fun, I'm here to like walk around. I'm an older, more experienced nerd now, and I'm here to like look back, and you can kind of scratch your chin and think, I was a younger man then. Look how much I've grown from those days.
I'm even curious to see how a lot of people who have like played WoW, even from like say Cataclysm or Pandaria or any of that, to have them go play vanilla WoW and then see what their take is on it after hearing all these stories.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly the other urge that's tied to that one, right? This is the like, when you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, right? You want to like take the WoW youngins and be like, all right, boy, back when I was in WoW, we only had 3 classes, and DPS meters, they weren't no thing at all. And you want to like take people back and kind of experience it again. It's like you love something like a movie or a book, and you've watched the movie 1,000 times, you can quote every line, but you'll never get that feeling of experiencing it for the first time. So instead, we try to be like media vampires, and we're like, yes, but let's all go back to Stormwind, like 'twas Stormwind of yore, and I shall show you my old stomping grounds. And then you can watch them, and you can be like, yeah, see, this is what it was like. This is what it was like back then.
Yeah.
This is what we have instead of children. We have other nerds who just happen to be not as experienced as we are, so we can go back and play these games and see what the kids think of
Part of me
weird old Uncle Adam's adventures in Stormwind.
Part of me even envisions it like the D&D thing you're talking about, where it's like, all right, you ready to play D&D? It's like, yeah, all right, open the treasure. It's like, it's a cobra, you died. And
Right?
they're like, I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, is this what you used to think fun was? Because I gotta break it to you, Grandpa. This is not fun. This is dumb. This is dumb, and I hate it. Yeah, I mean that's the tricky thing about games versus like a lot of other media, right? Like if you go back and read Watchmen, for example, it doesn't matter that it's not the mid '80s anymore. The art is still art, and it's in a different style, but it's still there. We can go and we can look at like the statue. We can look at Michelangelo's David, and we're not going to be like, oh, look at the polygons on that statue. It's still a statue, right? You can still appreciate it. But with video games, because they're such a product of their time, both technologically and mechanically, in terms of how games work, they can feel really dated really quickly. You go back and you play an old game, and it's much harder to immerse yourself in it because the things that we see as being integral to design, the lessons that we've learned as a game design culture, they're clearly obviously not learned then. And I think that a lot of experience of older games, especially the sort of middle school of games like N64, PlayStation 1, the kind of EverQuests of the world, that like late 90s to early mid 2000s, those games, they haven't aged well enough that we can look back at the pixel art and be like, oh, it's cute, and they only had 3 channels for the sound, and like it exists in a time. It just looks like an uglier, shittier version of what we have now.
Yeah.
And so that's hard. What I really wonder is what World of Warcraft will look like to people who are playing games who were born like now, or were born in the next 20 years, right? When they're going to return to that, and it predates their whole experience with games. I think that for us and for the folks who are just sort of a generation behind in terms of video games, I think it's an interesting experience because it's hard to escape that veneer of crappiness that these early games have. And I think WoW has struggled with that, right? Like, because there's every once in a while there's a graphical update to be like, yep, doesn't look like it did in 2004 anymore. finally.
Yeah.
I remember actually like really caring about that, being able to watch it and see some of those things change and be like, oh God, thank you. Now the, goblins don't look like 6 triangles stapled together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to talk about role playing here because maybe we've been talking about WoW, and obviously WoW is tied into role playing, clearly. So I want to see, how'd you get into role playing, and what made you get like so heavily into role playing that you became a DM and created all the stuff you did?
So I remember getting a copy of Dungeons and Dragons from an uncle of mine. It was my mom's younger brother, and he was, when I was like 10 or so, he would have probably been like 20 or 22, and he was moving, and he was just taking out all of his stuff and piling it into his Camaro or whatever, getting ready to go. And he was like, "Here you go, kid. Here's some stuff that I had when I was a teenager that I don't need anymore." And it was some D&D books and some X-Men comics and a bunch of heavy metal magazines, which are not appropriate to give to a 10-year-old at all.
Yeah.
And they all smell like weed, which I did not know for a long time. I remember being like, wait a second, I know this smell. This smells like my Dungeons and Dragons books. I'm like, oh, now I understand. Okay, all right, now I understand why Mom was giving my uncle that weird look. So I got these books, and I was like, well, these are like weird shaped like textbooks or something. Like I had no context for them. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the art, and I was like, oh, okay. Like there's a guy with a sword, and there's a cool wizard, and you're 10, so you don't know that it's all like really badly drawn line art from the 70s. But I remember trying to muddle through figuring out how to play. I was like, there's a game in here, and it involves weird dice because there's a bag of these weird dice in here, and trying to kind of figure that out. And I think the process, me and my friends playing Bard's Tale on my buddy's computer and playing the Super Nintendo, playing Final Fantasy, and kind of all of these like fantasy games and the books that we were reading, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and trashy Dragonlance novels. Mm-hmm. It all kind of came together all at once. Like I was exposed to all this stuff. And by the time I was like 12 or 13, I was already pretty well versed in the tiny part of the tabletop fandom that I had access to. I knew right away that I wanted to be able to kind of tell my own cool stories because I'd been absorbing them for so long. And then I just all the way through high school, I'm that cliche where I was like in drama club and I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I watch shows like Freaks and Geeks, and the characters in that are a little older than I was, but it hits home pretty damn hard. And I remember just having this like fantastic time playing just video games, like whether it was with my brother or with my friends, whatever the venue, everybody had like a game they really liked. And for me, it was D&D, and that was kind of like my thing. And it sort of always has been. There was a period of time where I didn't play a ton, but I got over that right quick and came right back to it. And I have, throughout my adult time, either always had a campaign going, or, I've worked in game stores and comic stores and been exposed to games that way. And obviously the internet is like a huge, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's this thing that we have on our computers where you can find out about stuff.
That's insane.
But thankfully, like my parents, they didn't understand what the internet was, but they knew that it was a thing, that it was important for kids to have access to. Again, like heavy metal magazines, you need to be careful about what you let your kids do on the internet, especially when no one seems to know what the internet is. So, I spent a lot of time on like Usenet and on IRC talking to other nerds, and I always felt like I was part of a community of dorky folks, even if they were all much older than me most of the time. But once I was out of high school and in college briefly, it just became like a regular thing. It was just a thing that I would do to socialize with people. I have kind of a hard time with like unstructured socializing. Like I get really weird at parties because I don't know what to say or where to stand or whose turn it is to talk. Yeah. But in Dungeons and Dragons, the game tells you when it's your turn to talk, and you can interact with people in a way that I've always found really cool. Like you get to see a side of people at the table that you might not otherwise, because it's kind of ironic because people are pretending to be someone else, but I think you get to know them by watching the choices that they make. And a lot of the people that I'm friends with now, like people like Strippin or Dodger or Jesse, or really anybody that I've played games with, I've gotten to know them by playing games with them, playing role-playing games. And so for me, it's a really good like social outlet. And I think that it's sort of inevitable because of the nature of the game to play Dungeons and Dragons. If you want to make your own stuff for it, if you want to make a monster or make up a new treasure or whatever, you don't need to know a coding language. You don't need any special hardware. You just need a pencil and some paper and like know how D&D works. And so, you know, we would make our own dungeons and create our own classes and stuff for it and share them with each other over IRC and text files. And eventually, you know, I got to a point where I was well versed enough in games and kind of had the desire that I got together with a friend of mine, and we made our own role-playing game. We made Dungeon World. And from there, you know, that was sort of the springboard into doing all this stuff professionally. You know, we've been selling Dungeon World for about 5 years now, give or take. And I got into Twitch and YouTube and streaming and stuff because Roleplay, JP's crew, they played a game of Dungeon World, and I reached out and was like, hey, you're playing my game. That's really cool. Like, thanks, guys. If you need anything, like custom classes or anything to make the game run smoother for you, let me know. And, you know, we talked a bunch about that, and I just remember thinking, like, wow, this is really cool. Like, this is a really great way to put not just my game, but, like, tabletop role-playing games as a thing in front of more people. And I'm real curious about this, so I'm gonna try and check it out. And so, you know, JP gave me a show to GM. We started doing Swan Song, and then I did Mirror Shades. And I remember partway through doing both those shows, just getting really fed up with working in advertising. And I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm done. I quit. I quit my stupid job that I've had for 10 years. I'm done writing ad copy for cars and 7-Eleven, and it's it. I'm out. It's not like Mad Men. Well, there's a lot of drinking, but it's not otherwise not as glamorous. And I was like, cool, well, what the hell am I going to do with my life now? Maybe I'll find another job. And I just started streaming like video games and talking about game design, and people liked it. And I've been doing that for 3 years now, and it's great. And now all I do is like talk about role-playing games and play them and get people excited about something that I have loved for like 25 years this year. So it's pretty much the perfect place for me, because I you know, like you, that idea of showing people something that I have always had a fondness for, that idea of revisiting, you know, vanilla WoW. For me, it's showing people role-playing games. It's people being like, wow, this like old version of D&D is actually really cool. I didn't know they used to do it this way. Or, you know, I watched you run a game of 5th edition, and it really inspired me to get my friends together and try it out. That kind of stuff is just so great, because I love sharing those things with people, because it gives me another way to kind of access that newness, which goes back to what I was saying before about Daikia, right? Where like watching you GM Daikia, I was like, yes, this kind of like feckless, random, like we're just gonna figure it out and we're gonna have fun and we'll figure out the rules later, but mostly we're just here to roll dice and see what happens. Like that's what it's like for most people. I think that feeling of kind of unbridled creative joy at letting the dice tell you, like, all right, here's your next thing to figure out. What are you gonna do? And I love being able to access that. I love to see that happen for people. And the fact that I'm able to kind of make my everyday, my day-to-day out of that stuff just feels so good. It's so great. I love it.
Yeah, it's the literal, like, doing what you love is your job.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's the weird thing, is that I think a lot of content creators have this vibe too, where we spend a lot of time as young people being interested in like weird or niche stuff, playing a lot of video games, or, you know, just being really passionate about stuff that our parents or our mentors or whoever were like, yeah, do what you love, but not this. This is dumb. But do, you know, find the thing you love, like accounting. Do that. Love that, and that'll be, you know, but every day that I get paid to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, I think back to the many conversations that I had with like role models as a teen, being like, "Yo, you gotta put that Dungeons and Dragons shit away. You need to grow up and I don't know, do anything with your life." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, I refuse. I'm either gonna grow up and just be gamer trash, or the world will change around me, and now I get to do what I like." And I get paid for it. It's a career, and that just feels so cool. It's cool that that's available to me in my lifetime, but also that other people could do that. That the idea of following the weird nerdy thing you're passionate about can actually keep you alive and pay your bills, and not have you starve to death. You know, looking at your player's handbook, wishing you'd done something different with your life.
How did you create Dungeon World? You said you made it with your friend. Like, I don't even know what Dungeon World is, so like, can you explain it to me, like what it actually is and like like everything behind it?
Yeah. So Dungeon World is it's a tabletop role playing game, just like D&D is, or like any other TRPG. And what we originally set out to do was, because Sage, my co-writer, and I, we were both really active in the sort of small press, like indie RPG scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we set out to do was kind of capture something that felt like it was the mechanisms, the sort of story and fiction focused mechanisms of like a modern indie game, but was comfortable and familiar for people who wanted to play an elf wizard or a dwarf cleric. We wanted to use the tropes that D&D already had, but to present an alternate way to tell stories using those. And originally, when we set out to design it, we kind of wanted to make a game that indie tabletop folks would like, that they could use to tell D&D stories. But by the time we were ready to release it, we realized what we had done was we'd flipped it, and we'd made like an indie RPG for folks who were kind of fed up with how complex D&D had become. And yeah, we developed it and play tested it and did that whole thing for like 2.5 years, maybe a little less, before we did the Kickstarter. And you know, when we released it, I think we were like, all right, we want to do one print run. We'll ask for something small, like $3,000, something, just to see if people will buy it. We ended up making $80,000 on the Kickstarter, which at the time was huge. Like now, you know, we have tabletop RPG Kickstarters that are in the millions, right? We just saw Matt Colville's Kickstarter is going to close up above $2 million, which is just amazing. It for a tabletop RPG related product. It's really cool. So we were in that crowdfunding space like relatively early on, and the game has been absorbed into the sort of tabletop zeitgeist really positively, and still like gets a ton of play, and we get to go to cons and talk about it. And apparently, designing half a tabletop role playing game means I'm a game designer, and I can talk about game design and stuff now. But to that end, like I think it speaks to the sort of DIY nature of it. Like we didn't need a publisher. We didn't need like somebody else to give us like capital funding to do it. It was all Google Docs and playtesting among friends and other people who are fans of the same kind of game. And I think that's still true of the space. I think that if you want to get into game design, indie tabletop, like 2 or 3 page games, you can make them, you can playtest them, you can release them, and people will take them seriously and play them. I think that we're in a space where you don't have to. People ask me all the time, like, I want to release a game, I want to make a game. What should I learn in school? Like, what university should I go to? What programs should I be a part of? And I'm like, yo, that is yes, one way to learn about games, but just like play a lot of games and like care about them and like learn how they work and build your own and make 15 shitty games before you ever expect to make anything good. But start with tabletop. Start with that, because tabletop RPGs are like, they're like the soccer of game design, in that soccer is papopular around the whole world because the barrier for entry is very low, right? Like to play soccer, all you need is like a relatively open space and something ball-like to kick around with your friends. It's not like hockey. You don't need to buy pads and skates and get a Zamboni and all that shit. Anybody can play football, right? European football, soccer. Anybody can do the same with tabletop, because really all a tabletop RPG is is guidelines for making up a story, and everybody knows how to tell stories. So if you want to dip your toe into game design, tabletop is a great place to start because it's so easy, and because you can do it so kind of school like student debt free and see if you like it. Because if you like making tabletop games, you're gonna probably like video games too. And a lot of folks, I mean, less now, but a lot of folks who made like really famous, really big deal tabletop games or video games started in tabletop. Like I remember talking to Warren Spector about kind of where he got started. Warren Spector, who did like Deus Ex, Thief, games like that, he worked on the Rocky and Bullwinkle role-playing game. Like that was one of his first projects, Rocky and Bullwinkle role-playing game, right? He did adventures for Dragon magazine in the early 80s, right? He got his space there, and it's the same. Like a lot of people who designed levels for the original Quake were dungeon designers for D&D. There was a lot more crossover back then, and I think it's a great place to learn, kind of get your chops. And so for us, Dungeon World was the shape that took. We were able to make that game and publish it, and people have really responded to it and played it a lot. And I think it's cool because it speaks to how many other games there are out there too. Like if you don't like D&D, it's too complicated, you can play Dungeon World. You don't want to do dungeon stuff, there's space games, there's mutant games, there's cowboy games, there's pretty much like anything you can think of, there's a role-playing game for it. And if there isn't, that's your opportunity to make a new thing. Somebody that I follow on Twitter, a friend of mine, is designing a game where you play interior decorators, and your job is to interior decorate a house to please the demon that lives in the basement of the house. And if you do not do a good enough job, the demon will consume your soul. And you just have to move from house to house. Those are like your kind of missions. You go from house to house, and you interior decorate these houses to appease the demons that live within them. That's a role-playing game. You can do that. You can make that. You can publish a PDF. People will buy that because whatever weird idea you have, someone out there is going to think that it's a super cool idea. And I think that sort of boundless creative space is very encouraging to new designers.
That sounds like it could become an anime too.
Right?
The interior decorating demon anime.
Yep, totally. Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who wants to get into just role play games in general? Like they don't want to make them, they just want to play them. What do you think would be a good thing to start with?
Well, they should buy a copy of Dungeon World, or 2 or 12. I don't care. Just buy as many as you can get your hands on. No, I mean the thing is now is literally the best possible time to get into role-playing games than there ever has been. If you want to just jump in, just think of the genre that you want to play. If you want to play a space game, just Google space tabletop RPGs, look at some of them, engage with the communities you're already a part of, right? The fandoms, the Discord servers, the tweeters, and talk to other people who play these games, and they'll help recommend something that you can play. Or you can start with a classic. D&D 5th edition is so easy to learn. Just go buy the starter set and just try it. Like just get your friends together and be like, all right, we're gonna drink some beer and we're gonna play Dungeons and Dragons, and it's super easy. And if you're not ready to like jump in, there's lots of people you can watch play it to get a feel for it already, and everybody's going to have a different style, right? Like watching an episode of Court of Swords is going to be really different than watching an episode of Critical Role. But if you go on Twitch and you just pop open that D&D category, somebody right now is playing Dungeons and Dragons, and you can watch and you can see how they do it. And I think like all things, the easiest way to start doing something is to A, just do it, and B, like mimic people who are already doing it, right? Just like totally just copy the cool shit that Matt Mercer is doing or Holly Conrad is doing. Like watch other people and see how they play, and then just do that, and then you'll eventually learn kind of the things you like, the things you don't like, and you're gonna get better at it. I think that it's in a time where we spend a lot of our time and energy consuming the stories that other people tell us, right? We read a lot of comics, we watch a lot of TV shows, we watch movies. it's really cool to be able to sit down with your friends and be like, no, this is gonna be our story. You know, like this is our thing. We're gonna make this together. And when you're done, 10 or 20 or 30 sessions in, or even just at the end of your first session, you're gonna look back and you're all gonna have something you did together that you can laugh about and be excited about. You're gonna remember that time that Sir Spalder had that cobra jump out of the chest and bite him in the face. And that, Sir Spalder's player is probably not going to be that hype about it, but the rest of you'll be laughing about that for as long as you play Dungeons and Dragons. It's just taking that first step, because it can seem daunting, right? Doing funny voices and remembering the rules, and give yourself room to just screw it up. Like, just do dumb stuff and be fun. Like, yeah, exactly. If Crendor can do it, you can do it too.
It is very true. Hard. If I can do it, everybody else can definitely do it.
Yeah, I feel that.
All right. Well, we've been going a little over an hour, so I think it's about a good time to start wrapping it up. So, where can people find you? And I'll also put the Dungeon World thing. Where can people buy Dungeon World?
Cool, yeah. So Dungeon World, if you wanna buy it, that would be cool. You can go to www.dungeon-world.com or just dungeon.world. But if you want to just take a look at it and you're like, I don't know if I want to give out my money, that's cool too. The game's text is all available for free. If you just Google Dungeon World, there's a bunch of HTML versions of it. You can take a look at it, see how it might fit with the kind of game that you like. And you can find me and ask me questions about Dungeon World or RPGs or whatever on Twitter @SkinnyGhost. And you can watch all my stream stuff twitch.tv/Adam Koebel. I'm all over the place, but I host it all there.
Sweet. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining me. That was very fun.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, I learned a lot about role playing.
Yeah, that happens when people let me talk about it for an hour.
It was cool. So thanks for joining me again. And I will see everybody else on the next episode of Fishing with Crendor. And hopefully you go check out Adam and see all that stuff. So thanks for watching. And I'll see you later. See you.